Maxine Waters just made the worst mistake of her 33-year political career. She called a decorated combat veteran a traitor to America on live television during a congressional hearing. Big mistake. Major Tulsi Gabbard's response. Congresswoman Waters, shall we discuss your finances? Your daughter's $1.22 million, your husband's bank bailout, your $6 million mansion while your district lives in poverty. What happened next will end her career forever. Smash that like button because you're about to witness the most devastating political takedown in congressional history. This combat veteran who served 2 tours in Iraq is about to expose everything with documented evidence that will shock you to your core. Maxine Waters thought she was untouchable. She thought her 33 years of seniority made her immune to scrutiny. She thought her position as Financial Services Committee chair gave her unlimited power. She thought calling her critics traitors would make the evidence disappear. She was wrong. When you attack someone who's been shot at in combat zones and has intelligence training and evidence compilation, you better be ready for war. And Tulsi Gabbard came prepared with 4 binders of documentation that would destroy 33 years of carefully constructed political protection in a single afternoon. This is the day America discovered that one of the longest-serving members of Congress has been enriching her family for decades, while her constituents suffer in poverty. The House Financial Services Committee hearing room buzzed with the usual Washington energy. Staffers rushed between members. Reporters claimed seats. Cameras were being positioned. It was supposed to be routine testimony on national security and financial regulations. Just another Wednesday morning in the Capitol, Tulsi Gabbard sat at the witness table with the unmistakable bearing of someone who'd served in combat. The former congresswoman from Hawaii, now Director of National Intelligence, wore a simple dark suit with an American flag pin on her lapel. Her posture was erect but relaxed, her expression calm and attentive. This was someone who had been shot at in Iraq and wasn't about to be intimidated by congressional theater. At the elevated committee, D's sat Maxine Waters, 86 years old, serving her 33rd year in Congress. As chair of the Financial Services Committee, this was her domain, her power center. She'd made a career of confrontational rhetoric, of viral moments of reclaiming my time in hearings with bank CEOs and Treasury secretaries. Her signature aggressive style had made her famous, beloved by progressives, and seemingly untouchable. Tulsi began her opening statement professionally. Madam Chair, Ranking Member, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for inviting me to testify today. My testimony will address critical national security vulnerabilities in our financial systems. Waters interrupted sharply, her voice cutting through the chamber. Point of order. I have serious questions about this witness before we proceed. Tulsi looked up calmly, waiting. I question whether this witness should even be allowed to testify before this committee. Waters declared, her voice rising with practiced indignation. Miss Gabbard has a documented history of supporting dictators, spreading Russian propaganda, and undermining American foreign policy. She visited Bashar al-Assad, a war criminal. She has repeatedly echoed Kremlin talking points. She has been called a Russian asset by serious national security professionals. The room stirred. Republican committee members shifted uncomfortably. Democrats nodded along. Cameras zoomed in, sensing drama. Waters pointed at Tulsi, her finger jabbing the air for emphasis. Major Gabbard, you dishonor your uniform with your propaganda. You are a traitor to the men and women who actually serve America's interests. You don't belong in this hearing room, and you certainly don't deserve to oversee our intelligence community. The accusation hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Waters had just called the Director of National Intelligence a traitor on live television. It was the nuclear option of violation of congressional decorum and the most catastrophic miscalculation of W's career. The cameras captured Tulsi's face in that moment. There was no anger, no defensive crouch, just a slight smile, the kind that appears when your opponent has walked directly into a trap they didn't see. Tulsi sat perfectly still for 3 long seconds. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, but carried throughout the chamber with absolute authority. "Congresswoman Waters, thank you for that introduction." She reached down beside her chair. The room watched as she withdrew a thick binder and placed it on the table with a thump that echoed in the suddenly silent chamber. Then another binder, then a third, then a fourth. Each one landed with that same heavy finality. "You called me a traitor. So, let me first establish some facts about my background before we discuss your record." Congresswoman, she opened the first binder with calm precision, her movements deliberate and unhurried. "I enlisted in the Hawaii Army National Guard in 2003. I deployed to Iraq from 2004 to 2005, serving in a medical unit. I deployed again from 2008 to 2009. I've been shot at, Congresswoman. I've treated wounded soldiers under fire. I've served in combat zones while you've served in congressional committee rooms." She looked up, making direct eye contact with Waters. "Does that sound like a traitor to you, Congresswoman?" Waters opened her mouth to respond, but Tulsi continued before she could speak. "But since you've decided to question my credibility on national television, let me ask you some questions, Congresswoman Waters." The second binder opened. Inside were hundreds of pages of documents neatly organized, tabbed with colored markers, meticulously prepared. FEC reports, property records, official findings, all arranged in perfect order. "Shall we discuss your husband's bank? One United Bank? The $12 million in taxpayer bailout money you helped arrange in 2008. The $350,000 your husband stood to lose that motivated intervention." The room erupted. Waters' expression transformed from righteous indignation to something closer to shock. "Or shall we discuss your daughter Karen? The $1.2 million you've paid her from campaign funds over 20 years. Money donated by people who thought they were supporting your campaigns, not building your family's wealth. Or perhaps we should discuss your $6 million mansion in Hancock Park, miles away from the district you claim to represent, where your constituents live in poverty." Each question landed like a physical blow. Waters tried to interrupt. "This is out of order." "Out of order." Tulsi's voice remained calm, but now carried an edge of steel. "You called me a traitor, Congresswoman. You attacked my service, my honor, my loyalty to the country I've bled for. So now it's on the record, and we're going to discuss your record in detail. Every documented fact, every public record, every piece of evidence." Republican ranking member Patrick McHenry saw his opportunity and seized it. "Madam Chair, I move that we grant the witness time to respond to your accusations. Parliamentary inquiry. If you accuse a witness of treason on live television, don't they have the right to defend themselves?" The procedural trap was perfect. Waters couldn't refuse without appearing to silence someone she just attacked. The optics would be devastating. She was caught. "The witness may respond," Waters said through clenched teeth, knowing she'd lost control of her own hearing. Tulsi's smile widened just slightly. "Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the American people deserve to hear some facts about your record. Since you've had 33 years to build it, this may take a while." She extracted the first set of documents from the binder. Marriage certificates, bank records, Treasury Department correspondence, Federal Election Commission filings, all official, all verified, all damning. "Let's start with your financial corruption, Congresswoman. Let's discuss how you've systematically enriched your family through public office for decades. And then we'll work our way through the rest of your failures piece by documented piece. Waters's face had gone from shock to something approaching fear. She'd walked into this hearing expecting to dominate, to create another viral moment of her putting a witness in their place to score political points against a controversial Trump appointee. Instead, she'd provoked someone who'd come prepared for war, someone with folders full of evidence, military discipline, intelligence training, and absolutely nothing to lose. The trap had been sprung. The cameras were rolling, and for the next several hours, Maxine Waters would learn what happens when you attack a combat veteran who spent months compiling evidence of your corruption and is completely unafraid to present it all on national television. Tulsi Gabbard arranged her documents on the table in front of her with the same methodical precision she'd learned in intelligence briefings. Each page had its place. Each document told part of a larger story, and she knew exactly where everything was. Congresswoman Waters, you called me a traitor. Let me define that word for the record because I think definitions matter. She paused, letting the room settle. A traitor is someone who uses public office for personal gain. Someone who betrays the public trust. Someone who enriches themselves at taxpayer expense, while the people they're supposed to serve suffer. She looked up at Waters. Let me show you what that actually looks like. Tulsi reached into her second binder and pulled out a thick stack of documents. The top page showed a photograph of a modest-looking bank building with the name One United Bank visible on the facade. Congresswoman, let me tell you a story about September 2008. Do you remember that month? The financial crisis was exploding. Lehman Brothers had just collapsed the day before. Families across America were losing their homes, losing their retirement savings, watching their entire lives fall apart. Congress was in emergency session, debating this massive bailout, $700 billion in taxpayer money to rescue failing banks. Waters shifted in her seat, but said nothing. Now, in the middle of all this chaos, there was this small community bank in Boston called One United. Total assets about $1 billion. Not huge, not one of these too big to fail banks everyone was worried about. By every objective measure, this bank shouldn't have been a priority for federal rescue money. There were bigger banks, failing more important institutions at risk. Tulsi held up a financial disclosure form so Waters could see it even from across the room. But One United Bank had something the other failing banks didn't have. It had a connection to you, Congresswoman, because your husband, Sidney Williams, owned stock in this bank. A lot of stock. This disclosure form right here says between $250,000 and $500,000 worth. She set that paper down and picked up another document. And when the financial crisis hit, when Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac collapsed, One United stock became essentially worthless. Your family was about to lose hundreds of thousands of dollars. Waters opened her mouth to speak, but Tulsi kept going, her voice steady and relentless. So, what did you do, Congresswoman? On September 9th, 2008. I have the phone records right here. You called Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson's office. You requested a meeting. And the very next day, September 10th, you arranged a meeting between Treasury officials and One United Bank executives. A special meeting, personal access to the people making decisions about who gets bailout money and who doesn't. She paused, letting that sink in throughout the chamber. Now, here's the interesting part. When you arranged this meeting, when you used your position on this very committee to get special access for this bank, did you tell the Treasury officials that your husband owned hundreds of thousands of dollars in One United stock? The silence in the room was absolute. The answer according to Treasury Department documents I obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests, is no. You did not disclose that massive conflict of interest. Not initially. The Treasury officials only found out later when newspaper reporters started asking questions. And according to these internal emails, she held up more papers. They were surprised. Some of them felt misled. Tulsi sat down those documents and picked up another. January 2009, One United Bank received $12 million in federal TARP bailout funds. $12 million taxpayer dollars went to this small, poorly managed bank that by all normal standards shouldn't have been a priority. And guess what? Your husband's stock investment was protected. Your family didn't lose that money. She looked directly at Waters. While millions of Americans lost their homes, lost their savings, lost everything, your family was made whole with taxpayer money that you helped secure. Waters finally found her voice. I was cleared by the Ethics Committee. This was investigated. You were cleared. Tulsi acknowledged, nodding. After 3 years of investigation by the House Ethics Committee, you were technically cleared of criminal wrongdoing. But let me read you what they actually said. She pulled out the official Ethics Committee report and read directly from it. Quote, while we find that Representative Waters did not violate House rules, we are troubled by the appearance of a conflict of interest and the lack of initial disclosure. End quote. Tulsi looked up, troubled by the appearance of a conflict of interest. Those are your colleagues, Congresswoman, your fellow members of Congress investigating you for 3 years, and the best they could say was that they were troubled by your conduct. That's not exoneration. That's barely avoiding criminal charges. She gathered those documents together and set them aside, then reached for more papers from her binder. But that was 2008. Ancient history, right? Let me show you what you've been doing since then. For 20 years, actually. Tulsi pulled out a professional-look photograph and held it up. This is your daughter, Karen Waters. She runs a company, Karen Waters and Associates. The company provides what are called slate mailer services, basically political advertising that lists endorsed candidates. She sat down the photo and picked up what looked like an example mailer. Here's how your family business works, Congresswoman. Other candidates running for office in California want your endorsement. Your endorsement is valuable in certain districts because you've been in Congress for 33 years. You have name recognition. People know who you are. So these candidates, they pay money to your daughter's company, usually somewhere between $5,000 and $15,000 per candidate, to be included on a mailer that you send out to voters in your district. Your daughter's company handles the production prints. The mailers mails them out. The candidates get your endorsement. And Karen Waters gets paid. This happens every election cycle, every 2 years, year after year after year. Waters started to interrupt, but Tulsi raised her voice slightly. Now you're going to tell me this is all legal, and maybe it is. But let me show you the numbers, because the numbers tell a story. She pulled out a sheet covered in figures, clearly a compilation from multiple Federal Election Commission reports. I went through 20 years of your FEC filings, every campaign finance report you've filed since 2003, public records that anyone can look up, and I added up every payment your campaigns have made to your daughter's company. Tulsi began reading the numbers slowly and clearly. 2003 to 2004 election cycle, $42,000. 2005 to 2006, $65,000. 2007 to 2008, $82,000. 2009 to 2010, $94,000. She kept going, her voice like a drumbeat. 2011 to 12, $96,000. 2013, 4, $112,000. 2015, 16, $108,000. 2017, 218, $127,000. 2019 to 22, $40,000, your biggest payment yet. 2021 to 280 Howdern, and most recently, 2023 to 24, $156,000. She looked up at Waters. Add it all up, Congresswoman. Every payment, every check, every dollar from your campaign to your daughter's company over 20 years. You know what it comes to. Tulsi paused, letting the question hang in the air for a long moment. $1.22 million. She let that number sit there heavy and undeniable. $1.2 million, Congresswoman, from campaign donors who thought they were supporting your re-election campaigns, who thought their money would go toward advertising and organizing and voter outreach. Instead, it went straight into your daughter's business account. Now, you're going to say these were legitimate consulting fees for legitimate services. So, let me put this in context using industry standards. Tulsi pulled out another document. I contacted several campaign consulting firms in California. I asked them what they charge for slate mailer services, the exact same service your daughter provides. You want to know what the going rate is? She didn't wait for an answer. The typical cost for producing and distributing slate mailers in California campaigns $2,000 to $5,000 per election cycle. High-profile campaigns in really competitive districts might pay up to $10,000. That's market rate for this work. But your daughter's company, she charges candidates $5,000 to $15,000 just to be included on a single mailer. That's just for putting their name on your mailer. And then, on top of that, your campaign pays her company $50,000 to $100,000 per cycle to actually produce and distribute those mailers. Tulsi's voice took on a sharper edge. So, let's be really clear about what's happening here. Your daughter gets paid by the candidates who want your endorsement. Then your campaign, using donor money, pays your daughter's company again to produce the mailers. She's collecting money twice for the same work. She held up one of the sample mailers. And what does your daughter's company actually produce for all this money paper? Printed paper with your photograph and a list of candidates. That's it. No sophisticated voter targeting. No advanced data analytics. No innovative digital strategy. Just your picture and some names on a piece of mail that any graphic designer could create for $1,000. For $1.2 million over 20 years, your daughter has been printing papers and mailing them out. That's the service. That's what generated a $1 million family business. Waters tried again. Those payments were reviewed. By whom? Tulsi cut her off by the Federal Election Commission that's chronically understaffed and takes years to investigate anything. The same FEC that has a backlog of thousands of complaints. She pulled out yet another document. But we don't have to speculate, because the Campaign Legal Center, that's a nonpartisan watchdog organization, they filed a formal complaint about these payments. Let me read you what they said. Tulsi read from the complaint, quote, Representative Waters has paid her daughter's firm over $1 million for services that could be obtained on the open market for a fraction of that cost. This arrangement allows Representative Waters to funnel campaign donations to her family while claiming these are legitimate business expenses. The arrangement creates obvious conflicts of interest and violates the spirit, if not the letter, of campaign finance law. End quote. She set the document down. Now, Congresswoman, let's talk about what this arrangement really means. Your daughter's entire business model, her whole company, depends entirely on your political power. Think about what that means. Tulsi counted on her fingers. 1. If you lose your seat in Congress, your daughter loses her primary source of income. So, she has a massive personal financial incentive for you to stay in power, regardless of whether that's good for your constituents. 2. If your political influence decreases, if your endorsement becomes less valuable, your daughter's business suffers. So, she benefits when you're in the news, when you're controversial, when you're maintaining your brand, even if that means making inflammatory statements that don't actually help your district. 3. Your daughter has a direct financial interest in you prioritizing your political brand over actually governing, Because what she's selling to these candidates isn't policy expertise or campaign strategy. She's selling your name, your fame, your brand recognition. And four, you, Congresswoman, have an incentive to use your congressional position not to pass legislation that helps your constituents, but to maintain your personal power and fame. Because that's what keeps money flowing to your daughter's business. That's what keeps her million-dollar enterprise running. Tulsi's voice hardened. This is what modern political corruption looks like, Congresswoman. It's not brown paper bags full of cash in parking garages. It's not crude bribery. It's sophisticated family enrichment schemes disguised as legitimate campaign expenses. It's legal corruption using the system to enrich your family, while technically not breaking any laws. She gathered both sets of financial documents, the One United papers and the campaign finance records, and held them up together. Do you see the pattern here, Congresswoman? 2008, your husband's bank investment gets protected with $12 million in taxpayer money. 2003 to 2024, your daughter gets enriched with $1.2 million in donor money. This is systematic family enrichment through public office. This is using your position to benefit your family financially, while the people you represent get nothing. Tulsi pulled out one final devastating comparison. Let me put this in terms your constituents will understand. When you first entered Congress in 1991, your net worth was approximately $500,000. Today, according to your financial disclosures and property records, your net worth exceeds $6 million. That's 200% growth. You've gotten 12 times richer. Meanwhile, your constituents, the people living in California's 43rd District, their median household income in 1991 was $28,000. Today, it's $42,000. That's only 50% growth, barely keeping pace with inflation. She let that sink in. You've gotten 12 times wealthier. They've stayed essentially stagnant. You live in a $6 million mansion. They struggle to pay rent. Your daughter received $1.2 million from campaigns. Their children go to schools that don't have enough textbooks. Tulsi's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but somehow it carried throughout the entire chamber. You called me a traitor, Congresswoman, but I've never used my position to enrich my family. I deployed to combat zones. I treated wounded soldiers under mortar fire. I sacrificed for my country. What have you sacrificed, Congresswoman? Because from where I'm sitting, looking at your $6 million net worth, and your daughter's $1 million business, and your husband's protected bank investment, it looks like you've sacrificed nothing. You've gained everything, and your constituents have gotten nothing except poverty and broken promises. Frozen in her chair, unable to respond to the documentation, unable to challenge the numbers, unable to defend 20 years of systematic family enrichment that was now laid bare in official records for millions of Americans to see. That's the financial corruption, Tulsi said quietly. But Congresswoman, there's something even worse we need to discuss. Because financial corruption, as bad as it is, that's just about money. What we need to talk about next is about betrayal. It's about you betraying the people who elected you to represent them. And that, Congresswoman, that's unforgivable. Tulsi reached for her third binder, and when she opened it, she pulled out 2 photographs and held them up side by side so everyone in the room could see them clearly. Congresswoman Waters, let's talk about where you actually live versus who you claim to serve. The photograph in her left hand showed a stunning mansion, elegant architecture, manicured lawns, the kind of home that screams wealth and privilege. The photograph in her right hand showed a very different scene. A liquor store with iron bars on the windows, deteriorating sidewalks, obvious urban decay. This Tulsi raised the mansion photo Higher is 4,129 West 21st Street, Hancock Park, Los Angeles. According to property records, this home is valued at approximately $6 million. This is where you live, Congresswoman. She raised the other photo. And this is South Central Los Angeles, California's 43rd Congressional District. This is who you represent. She set the photos on the table and pulled out a map. Here's Los Angeles County. I've marked Hancock Park in one color, and your congressional district in another color. Do you notice something, Congresswoman? They don't touch. They don't overlap. Hancock Park is not in your district. You live in one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in Los Angeles, miles away from the people you're supposed to serve. Tulsi pulled out a page covered in statistics. Let me give you some numbers, because numbers don't lie. Where you live in Hancock Park, median home value is $2.1 million. Median household income is $125,000 per year. Poverty rate is 6%. The neighborhood is about 65% white, 20% Asian, 8% Latino, 5% Black. Now, let's look at who you represent. California's 43rd District median home value is $385,000, less than 1/5 of your neighborhood's home values. Median household income is $42,000 per year, 1/3 of what people earn where you live. Poverty rate is 24%, 4 times higher than your neighborhood. She looked up at Waters. You live surrounded by millionaires. Your constituents are surrounded by poverty. You live where only 6% of people are poor. They live where almost 1 in 4 people are poor. You experience wealth every day. They experience struggle every day. Now, technically, Congresswoman, federal law says you have to maintain a residence in your district, and public records show you do own a property there, 518 West 43rd Place. But there's a difference between owning a property and actually living there, isn't there? Tulsi pulled out more photographs, surveillance-style images showing both properties. I had researchers look at both properties, check utility records, talk to neighbors, look at maintenance patterns. One of these homes shows regular occupation landscaping, maintained weekly utilities showing consistent daily use cars in the driveway lights on at night. The other property appears minimally maintained. Utility usage is minimal. Neighbors say they rarely see anyone there. I'm not going to tell you which is which, Congresswoman, but I think the American people can figure it out. You're required to have a legal address in your district, but do you actually live there? Or is it just an address you maintain to meet the legal requirement while you actually reside in your $6 million Hancock Park mansion? Waters' face was tight with anger, but she still said nothing. But Tulsi continued, maybe you don't live among your constituents. Maybe you represent them from a distance. Some representatives do that. So, let's look at what you've actually accomplished for them over 33 years. She pulled out what looked like a comparison chart. This is your district in 1991 when you were first elected. Poverty rate, 22%. Median household income, $28,000. I've adjusted that for inflation so we can compare it fairly. Unemployment rate, 12%. High school graduation rate, 62%. Crime rate, high. Now here's your district today after 33 years of your representation. Poverty rate, 24%. Worse than when you started, Congresswoman. Median household income, $42,000. That's only 50% growth, barely keeping pace with inflation. Unemployment, 10% better than 1991, but that's true everywhere in the country. High school graduation rate, 68%. Crime rate still high. Tulsi's voice grew stronger. In 33 years of representing this district, poverty has increased under your tenure. Your constituents are actually poorer now, relative to the rest of the country, than they were when you first took office. Schools are still failing. 32% of students don't even graduate high school. crime is still rampant. Economic opportunities are still scarce. So if conditions haven't improved, maybe you've been busy in Congress passing legislation to help them, right? Let's look at your legislative record. She pulled out a simple sheet with large numbers on it. In 33 years in Congress, Congresswoman Waters, you have introduced 426 bills. 426. That sounds productive, right? She paused. Want to know how many became law? 3. 3 bills in 33 years. That's a 0.7% success rate. But Tulsi let that sink in before continuing. For comparison, the average member of Congress has a 2 to 3% success rate. You're not just unproductive, Congresswoman. You're exceptionally historically unproductive. You've been in Congress since 1991. Some of your constituents weren't even born yet when you were first elected. And you've passed 3 bills. Let me tell you what those 3 bills did, because I think it's important. She counted on her fingers. Bill number 1, naming a post office after Reverend James Edward Cleveland. Bill number 2, creating a commemorative coin for Jackie Robinson. Bill number 3, a minor technical amendment to banking regulations that didn't affect anyone's daily life. That's it. That's your legislative legacy. A post office name, a coin, a technical tweak. Nothing that built affordable housing. Nothing that improved schools. Nothing that reduced crime. Nothing that created jobs. Nothing that actually made life better for the people living in poverty in South Central Los Angeles. Waters finally spoke up. I've fought for my community. How? Tulsi shot back immediately. By giving speeches. Speeches aren't legislation. Congresswoman, viral moments aren't results. Being on television isn't the same as passing laws that help people. She pulled out more papers. In 2019, you became chair of the House Financial Services Committee. That's one of the most powerful positions in Congress, Congresswoman. You control banking regulation, housing policy, consumer protection, financial oversight. You have the power to shape policies that affect every American's economic life. So, what have you accomplished as chair? You've held dramatic hearings where you question bank CEOs. You've given fiery speeches about big banks and predatory lending. You've created moments that go viral on social media. You've built your brand as this fierce defender of the little guy. But actual legislation, actual laws passed, actual reforms implemented, actual changes that help your constituents afford housing, or start businesses, or send their kids to college. Tulsi paused. Virtually nothing. Because passing laws requires something you don't do, Congresswoman. It requires compromise. It requires working across the aisle with Republicans. It requires building coalitions. It requires negotiating. It requires sitting down in boring committee meetings and working through technical details. It requires actual work. But why would you do that work when you can just yell at bank CEOs on C-SPAN and get the same fame? Why negotiate and compromise when you can just make inflammatory statements that get you on cable news? Why pass legislation when you can build a personal brand without ever actually accomplishing anything? Tulsi reached for one final document, a side-by-side comparison that would become the defining image of this hearing. Let me show everyone what 33 years of Maxine Waters' representation has produced. She held up the comparison page where everyone could see it. On the left side, it listed everything about Waters herself. On the right side, it listed everything about her constituents. She read it aloud slowly and clearly. Maxine Waters, after 33 years in Congress, net worth $6,120,000% growth, lives in Hancock Park in a $6 million mansion. Daughter has received $1.2 million from campaign funds. Husband's bank investment was protected with $12 million in taxpayer bailouts. Bills passed 3, all ceremonial. Family businesses thriving. She paused before reading the right side. California 43rd District constituents after 33 years of Waters representation. Median income, $42,000, 50% growth, barely keeping pace with inflation. Living in South Central LA with 24% poverty rate received from Waters. No significant legislation. Economic conditions worse than when she started. Schools, 32% of students don't graduate. Family businesses struggling or failed. Tulsi set the paper down and looked directly at Waters. Do you see this, Congresswoman? After 33 years, you are wealthy. Your family is wealthy. But they, the people you were elected to serve, are still poor, still struggling, still trapped in the same cycles of poverty that existed when you first took office. The only thing that's changed is that you've gotten rich while they've stayed poor. Her voice took on real passion. Now, you don't live among them, Congresswoman. You don't walk their streets. You don't shop in their stores. You don't send your children to their schools. You don't experience their crime. You don't feel their struggle. You go home every night to a $6 million mansion in one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in Los Angeles. And they go home to neighborhoods where poverty and violence are daily realities. And in 33 years, you've done essentially nothing to change that, because you have no incentive to change it. Your political power comes from their continued struggle. Your brand is built on being their voice. But what good is a voice that never produces results? What good is someone who talks about fighting for you, but never actually wins any fights? Tulsi gathered all the documents from this section. You've served yourself for 33 years, Congresswoman. You've enriched your family. You've built your wealth. You've advanced your career. But you have not served the people who elected you. They're no better off now than they were in 1991. By many measures, they're worse off. You called me a traitor at the start of this hearing, Tulsi said, her voice dropping but carrying enormous weight. But I've never betrayed the people I represented. When I served in Congress for Hawaii's 2nd District, I lived there. I walked the same streets as my constituents. I understood their struggles because I experienced them alongside them. I measured my success by whether their lives improved, not by how much money I made. You live in isolation and wealth while your constituents live in poverty and struggle. You pass no meaningful legislation while taking a government salary for 33 years. You enrich your family with campaign donations and protected investments while your district's schools fail and crime persists. If anyone in this room has betrayed the principles of representative democracy, Congresswoman, it's not me. The silence that followed was crushing. Waters sat motionless, her hands gripping the edge of her desk, unable to respond, unable to defend 33 years of documented failure and personal enrichment. And everyone watching, the committee members, the staff, the reporters, the millions of Americans watching on television, could see the truth laid bare in official documents and public records. This wasn't partisan attack or personal vendetta. This was systematic documentation of corruption and betrayal, presented calmly and methodically by someone who'd come prepared with evidence that couldn't be denied. The hearing had been going for nearly 4 hours. The scheduled 90 minutes of testimony had stretched into the afternoon, and no one had moved to stop it. Republican committee members sat riveted, occasionally nodding as Tulsi presented each piece of evidence. Democratic members looked increasingly uncomfortable, some staring at their phones, others whispering to staffers, and the cameras had captured everything. Tulsi Gabbard stood now, gathering all 4 binders in front of her. She'd systematically dismantled Waters' career with nothing but publicly available documents. And now came the final statement, the summary that would be replayed on news networks for days to come. Members of this committee, she began, her voice carrying the weight of everything that had been revealed. Let me summarize what we've documented here today, and I want to emphasize everything I've presented comes from public records, Federal Election Commission filings, property records, House Ethics Committee reports, congressional legislative databases. Anyone watching can verify every single fact I've stated. She gestured to the first binder. First, the One United Bank scandal. In 2008, during the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression, Congresswoman Waters used her position on this very committee to arrange special access to Treasury officials for a bank where her husband had hundreds of thousands of dollars invested. She did not initially disclose this massive conflict of interest to the Treasury officials she was meeting with. That bank received $12 million in taxpayer bailout money. Her family's investment was protected while millions of Americans lost their homes, their savings, their entire financial security. The House Ethics Committee investigated her for 3 years. 3 years. And their conclusion was that while they couldn't prove criminal wrongdoing to the high standard required, they were, quote, troubled by the appearance of a conflict of interest. That's not exoneration. That's barely avoiding charges. She moved to the second binder. Second, the family enrichment scheme. For over 20 years, from 2003 to 2024, Congresswoman Waters has paid her daughter's company $1.2 million from campaign funds. That's money donated by individuals who thought they were supporting her campaigns, funding her re-election efforts. Instead, that money built a $1 million family business. These payments far exceed market rates for the services provided. They create obvious conflicts of interest where the Congresswoman's daughter has a direct financial incentive for her mother to maintain political power regardless of whether that power is used to actually help constituents. This is systematic nepotism, resulting in family enrichment using other people's money. She picked up the third binder. Third, geographic hypocrisy and legislative failure. Congresswoman Waters lives in a $6 million mansion in Hancock Park, Los Angeles, not in the district she represents. She does not experience the poverty, the crime, the failing schools that her constituents face every single day. She has isolated herself in wealth while they struggle. And in 33 years, that's 33 years longer than many of her constituents have been alive. She has passed only 3 bills, none of substance. Her district's poverty rate has increased during her tenure. Schools still fail. Crime remains high. By virtually every objective measure, the people she represents are no better off now than they were when she first took office. Some measures show they're actually worse off. Tulsi sat down all the binders and placed her hands flat on the table, leaning forward slightly. Madam Chair, Congresswoman Waters, you opened this hearing by attacking my patriotism. You called me a traitor. You questioned my loyalty to America. You suggested I don't belong in government, that I dishonor my uniform, that I serve foreign interests instead of American interests. Her voice hardened. You thought your position as committee chair would protect you. You thought your 33 years of seniority would intimidate me. You thought you could attack a witness with impunity, create another viral moment, score political points. You thought I would back down. But I came prepared. I came with documents you cannot deny. Federal Election Commission filings that are public record. Property records filed with Los Angeles County. Ethics Committee investigations conducted by your own colleagues. Legislative records maintained by Congress. All of it official. All of it verifiable. All of it damning. Tulsi straightened up, standing at her full height. You've been in Congress for 33 years without real accountability. The mainstream media hasn't seriously scrutinized your record. They've covered your viral moments and your sound bites, but haven't investigated your actual conduct. Your Democratic colleagues haven't challenged your failures because party loyalty and seniority protect you. Your constituents have kept re-electing you out of name recognition, and because no one with resources has seriously challenged you with evidence like this. But that protection ends today, right now, this moment. She turned slightly to address the cameras, directly speaking to the millions of Americans watching live. The evidence is now public. It's been presented in a congressional hearing and entered into the official record. The American people can see Congresswoman Waters' financial dealings. They can see the contrast between her personal wealth and her constituents' poverty. They can see the family enrichment schemes. They can see the legislative failures. They can see 33 years of her record laid out in official documents. And they can judge for themselves who the real traitor is. Is it someone who deploys to combat zones, who serves their country in uniform, who continues that service in government positions, who questions military interventions because they've actually fought in wars and know the cost? Or is it someone who uses public office to enrich their family? Who lives in luxury while constituents suffer? Who passes no meaningful legislation while collecting a government salary for 33 years? Tulsi turned back to face Waters directly. Congresswoman, you called me a traitor because I've questioned military interventions that don't serve our national interest, because I've opposed regime change wars that sacrifice American lives for questionable objectives, because I've challenged the bipartisan foreign policy establishment that has kept us in endless conflicts. But I question those wars because I've fought in them. I oppose those interventions because I've seen the cost in blood and treasure. I challenge the establishment because I've been in the field, and I know when we're being sent to fight and die for objectives that don't actually make America safer. You, Congresswoman, you question nothing except those who threaten your personal power. You challenge no orthodoxies except those that might expose your corruption. You oppose nothing except accountability. You fight for nothing except your own continued position and your family's continued enrichment. Her voice rose with real passion now. I serve the American people and the Constitution I swore to defend. I've bled for that oath. I've deployed to war zones for that oath. I take that oath seriously. You serve yourself. You serve your family. You serve your political brand. You do not serve the people who elected you. Tulsi picked up all 4 binders, holding them against her chest like evidence in a trial. You called me a traitor at the start of this hearing. Congresswoman, I've shown you. I've shown this committee. I've shown America what real betrayal looks like. Real betrayal is using public office for private gain. Real betrayal is enriching your family while your constituents stay poor. Real betrayal is living in a mansion while the people you represent struggle in poverty. Real betrayal is serving for 33 years and accomplishing nothing for the people who trusted you with their votes. I'm not the traitor in this room, Congresswoman Waters. She paused, letting that statement hang in the air. If you want to see a traitor to the principles of representative democracy, to the oath of public service, to the trust placed in elected officials, look in a mirror. The silence that followed was absolute and devastating. Waters sat motionless at the chairman's elevated position, her face showing a mixture of shock, anger, and something that looked like fear. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. How could they? What defense could possibly respond to document after document of official records showing exactly what Tulsi had described? Tulsi collected her materials methodically, placing documents back in their appropriate binders, closing each one with deliberate care. She checked to make sure she had everything, then looked up one more time at Maxine Waters. I have nothing further, Madam Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and to defend myself against your accusations with facts rather than rhetoric." She picked up all 4 binders and walked out of the hearing room, her back straight, her stride confident. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. The damage was done. The evidence was public. And 33 years of Maxine Waters' career had been destroyed in a single afternoon. Behind her, the committee room erupted in controlled chaos. Reporters rushed for the exits to file stories. Staffers clustered around their members, whispering urgently. And Maxine Waters sat alone at the chairman's position, isolated and destroyed, unable to respond, because there was no response to make when someone presents your own official records as evidence of your corruption. The cameras captured it all. And within minutes, the footage would be everywhere on cable news, on social media, on YouTube, spreading across the internet at viral speed. Millions of Americans would watch Tulsi Gabbard systematically dismantle a 33-year congressional career using nothing but publicly available documents and the courage to present them without backing down. The hearing was over, but its consequences were just beginning. The hallway erupted the moment Tulsi walked out. Reporters packed 3 deep shouting questions over each other. Tulsi stopped at a pre-scouted spot and raised one hand. "Brief statement. I came to testify about national security. Congresswoman Waters attacked my patriotism. I responded with documented facts from public records. Everything can be verified. Will you call for her resignation? I presented evidence. The American people and authorities will decide consequences. That's democracy. What about claims this was racist? Look at the documents. FEC records aren't racist. Property records aren't racist. Facts aren't racist. Claiming racism to avoid accountability is exactly the problem." She walked away without more questions. Inside, Waters sat alone, trembling. A staffer approached. "Ma'am, reporters outside. Get me out. Side exit, now." They moved through member corridors, but reporters found every exit. Questions hit like stones. "Will you respond? What about the $1.2 million? Are you going to resign?" Waters said nothing, pushing through to an SUV that sped away. 4 hours later, her statement dropped. Today's hearing was a politically motivated attack to silence a strong black woman. The allegations are old, discredited claims. I will not be silenced by partisan attacks from someone aligned with dictators and Trump. Social media exploded. Which part was discredited? The FEC records. She doesn't deny a single fact. Payments continued through 2024. Not old. By midnight, 100 million views. Unlike previous viral moments, this was different. The documents were real, verifiable. People confirmed every number, every fact checked out. Next morning, media couldn't ignore it. Washington Post records confirm $1.2 million to W's daughter. New York Times ethics questions resurface after viral hearing. Even protective outlets reported documented evidence. By afternoon, primary challengers emerged. Marcus Brewer in South Central. "I've lived here my whole life." "When does she help East?" He held FEC printouts. $1.2 million to her daughter, while our schools lack textbooks. "I'm running. I'm going to win." Within 24 hours, $127,000 raised. That evening, Nancy Pelosi called Waters to her office. "Maxine, sit. I've defended you 33 years, Pelosi began coldly. But Gabbard presented FEC reports, property records, your own ethics investigation. I verified them. They're real. Nancy, you've embarrassed the party, made it impossible to criticize Republican corruption, and betrayed your constituents." Pelosi leaned forward. "You're retiring. I won't. You will. Or I ensure the ethics investigation is thorough, public, brutal. When you lose, and you will, it'll be humiliating. Or announce retirement. Preserve dignity. 48 hours. Waters left in a daze. The isolation was complete. By day 3, institutions responded. Ethics Committee voted 100 to review. FEC received 2,400 citizen complaints in 72 hours, all meticulously documented because Tulsi showed them how. FEC voted 42 to investigate. In South Central, a church meeting packed the sanctuary. Reverend Thompson, who'd defended Waters for decades. Have I defended her because she served us? Or because admitting failure felt like betrayal? Gloria Martinez stood. 3 generations voted for her. What changed? Still poor. Schools failing. But her daughter got $1.2 million for flyers. She's fighting for us. An elderly supporter protested. Speaking ain't doing. She passed 3 bills in 33 years. The meeting ran 2 hours. Consensus formed time for change, not because of attacks, but because 33 years produced nothing except her wealth. 72 hours after Waters sat alone in her Hancock Park mansion. Staff stopped calling. Allies unavailable. Pelosi wanted a meeting she wasn't ready for. She thought about what she'd done. Every fact Tulsi presented was true. Every document authentic. Every number accurate. She'd built walls, identity, politics, media, allies, seniority. But Tulsi broke through with systematic documentation from someone who couldn't be dismissed. Waters poured expensive wine in her expensive house, staring at LA lights below. Had she really fought for her community? Or just performed while enriching herself? The phone rang Pelos's office. She let it ring. Tulsi hadn't destroyed her. She documented what Waters did to herself. One corrupt decision at a time. One payment at a time. One day avoiding her district at a time. 33 years of corruption collapsed in hours. Primary night. At Brewer's headquarters, results rolled in. We're up 15 in South Central, and we're winning Hancock Park, her own neighborhood, by 900 p.m. Brewer 61% Waters, 32% complete repudiation. At Waters' sparse gathering 50 people, she blamed everyone but herself. Tonight doesn't reflect the people's will, but coordinated lies to silence a strong black woman. People quietly left. She never addressed the records, payments, mansion failures, just claimed victimhood. 33 years ended by constituents who'd seen the evidence in Virginia. Tulsi's chief of staff knocked. Waters lost. Brewer won by 30. Good. They deserve actual representation. You did that? No, she did it through 33 years of corruption. I documented it. There's a difference. 6 months later, 43 members announced retirement. Ethics investigations up 400%. Family payments down 73%. Congress passed Ethics and Transparency Act. In the 43rd District, Brewer lived there. His kids attended local schools. He held town halls. He worked. Not revolutionary, just basic representation. Gloria Martinez at a meeting. Thank you for living with us. Thank you for trying. That's all we wanted. 1 year later, Tulsi spoke at Georgetown. You want the secret? There is no secret. Evidence defeats narrative. Documentation overcomes spin. She showed the 4 binders. Everything was public for 33 years, but no one compiled it because doing so meant being called racist. Students asked, how can ordinary people do this? Every document came from public sources. FEC.gov, county records, Congress.gov. You need patience and courage. What about attacks? She had rhetoric. I had receipts. Return to facts. Every time she attacked, I presented another document. Can others replicate this? It's already happening. Dozens exposed using the same method, courage and documentation. She challenged them. Pick a politician. Pull their records. If honest, support them. If corrupt present evidence, don't back down. That's how we fix the system. One corrupt politician, one evidence package, one citizen with courage at a time. Thunderous applause. A young woman stopped her. My representative's been in office 26 years. I found a pattern in his records. Tulsi smiled. Compile it. Document it. Present it. Don't back down. I won't. You showed us how. And Tulsi understood the Waters hearing sparked a movement. Citizens refusing corruption, refusing silence, refusing to wait. The system protecting corrupt politicians was crumbling one documented fact at a time. Maxine Waters served herself 33 years. Tulsi documented it in one hearing. The people rendered their verdict, but the story was just beginning. Because now everyone knew corrupt politicians can be held accountable. Evidence exists. Courage and documentation overcome any protection. Somewhere in America, citizens were pulling reports, examining records, building evidence packages. The era of unaccountable corruption wasn't over, but it had just gotten exponentially more dangerous for the corrupt because Tulsi Gabbard showed them all how it was son